Good morning, everyone. I hope you are well and good today. So, before we are going to discuss our new topic for this week, let us have first a recap. So, last week we discussed about the three literary periods. So, this week we are going to discuss that the Spanish period in the year 1521 to 1898. The start of the Philippines' more colorful history took place in March 6, 1521, when Ferdinand Magellan docked on the shore of Homonhon. The Filipinos were then called Ladinos, meaning they were Latinized. Filipinos were called at two things. One, Tagabayan, while the other is Tagabundok or Tagabukid. A person who is Tagabayan is considered urban or civilized and were in easy range of the church and state. A person who is Tagabundok or Tagabukid is a bruto salvage or savage brute or Indio and were the ones who live far from the center and the Spanish power. Number 1. Religious literature. When we say religious literature, it revolves around the life and the death of Jesus Christ. So it talks about the life or the death of Jesus Christ. Because Christianity played such a major role in social and intellectual life of Renaissance, almost all the literature produced in Europe at that time had some religious content. However, many types of works were specifically Christian in nature. Religious writers produced poetry, stories, essays, and dialogues written both in Latin and vernacular languages. All these works fell under the broad heading of devotional literature, which aimed to help the reader lead a more holy life. Devotional writing changed in several ways during the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. For example, by the middle of the 1300, the growing use of vernacular in the writing had helped to create new form of religious literature. At the same time, a large and new audience for books emerged among lay people. During the Renaissance, other factors such as development of printing and the intellectual movement known as humanism produced further changes in religious literature. However, people continued to read older religious texts, including works written by church fathers, individuals who shaped Christianity in its early centuries. Also, new religious works continued to focus on themes that have been traditional throughout the Middle Ages. Forms of religious literature. The number one is passion. Passion is about the passion or journey or offering rather, and the death of Jesus Christ. The Passion is a retelling of the Passion of Christ. Readings and performances of the Passion text are widespread in the Philippines, where they have synthesized indigenous religious performativity with Catholicism and political and social activism. There are three Passion texts, the first of which was published in 1704 by the Filipino poet Gaspar Aquino de Belen. The Passion is performed during Lent in cities and villages throughout the Philippines, often by unskilled pious actors and paid for as an act to piety by affluent patrons. Historically, the Passion has served as a symbolic lens through which political events and figures have been interpreted. In the late colonial period, during which nationalist speech was curtailed by the Spanish government and Catholic Church, the Passion narrative of the suffering of Christ was imbued with layers and nationalist. anti-clerical and anti-colonial meaning. Revolutionary leaders were associated with Christ, while peasants of nationalists were expected to be like his disciples, giving up their worldly lives in pursuit of independence. The execution of nationalist author Jose Rizal was remembered in the performance of the Passion, where Rizal's martyrdom echoed Christ's death. Over a half-century later, the assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr. would have the same effect. Now the second one is Sinaculo. Sinaculo, it depicts the European society through love and fame. It can also be a narrative about a journey, just like Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. It is also considered religious because it usually depicts the battle between the Christians and the Saracens or the Moors. The Sinaculo is a traditional Filipino dramatization of the life and times of Jesus Christ, done in singing, passion, and recitation. It is presented in the public square in many towns, in houses and streets during the season of Lent. His Sinaculo is a traditional Filipino dramatization of the life and times of Jesus Christ, done in singing, passion, and recitation. It is represented in the public squares in many towns, in houses, and streets during the seasons of Lent. The Cenaculo, from the Spanish cenaculo, is a Lenten play that depicts events from the Old and New Testament related to the life, sufferings, and death. Number 2 is secular or non-religious literature. When we say secular or non-religious literature, it revolves around tales of violence and adventure. The forms of secular and non-religious literature. Number 1 is awit. Awit, these are tales of chivalry where a knight saves a princess. Florante and Laura is a good example of awit. And then, awit is literally means song. This in Tanzak form seems very similar to Tanaga. It is unique in that a stanza should be one complete, grammatically correct sentence. Now, corrido. Corrido is a metrical tale or a tale that follows the structure of a poem. Corrido is a form of Philippine literature or a type of poem which is a part of Spanish influence. It is a genetic or generic term used for Filipino romance songs or poems, also known as metric romances. It consists of 8 syllables, each line and 4 lines each paragraph. It is often recited as melodic poem. An example of corrido is Ibong Adarna, which is a story of a brotherhood, their love for each other and their father. It was written during the Spanish era and became part of mythologies and Philippine literature. This corrido was first known as a life experience of the sons of King Fernando and Queen Valeriana of King Birbania. So we all know naman about the story of Ibong Adarna, and that is one of the example of corrido. It talks about heroism, love, and mysteries. The story is centered on a bird known as Adarna who possesses magical powers in which can heal any sort of sickness the moment the bird opens its mouth and begins to sing. It is also the story of a prince named Juan, one of the 3 sons of King Fernando who became friends with Princess Maria Blanca and Princess Leonora. A lot of people believe that this corrido was written by Jose de la Cruz, also known as Joseng Sisiw. Now, let's proceed to the prose narratives. When we say prose narratives, are easy to understand instructional materials that in literary light and teaches Filipinos on proper decorum. Pagsusulatan ng dalawang binibini sa Urban Feliza, 1864 is a good example. And then number 3 is propaganda literature. These were in the forms of satires, editorial, and new articles that aim to attack the Spanish rule. The propaganda trinity is composed of Dr. Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Haina. So Graciano Lopez Haina, he wrote a Prohibitud, one of his work written in Jaro, Iloilo in 1876 rather, 6 years after the Cavite revolt attacking the friars in the Philippines. He exposed how some of the friars were greedy, ambitious, and immortal. And then Marcelo H. del Pilar, Kainga kayo, or in English, be careful. Humorous and sarcastic, dig answer to Father Jose Rodriguez in Noli Me Tangere of Rizal, published in Barcelona, Vienna in 1888. He used Dolores Manapat as pen name here. So, we know naman already na isa sa mga sinulat ni Dr. Jose Rizal is yung Noli Me Tangere. So, Noli Me Tangere, his was the novel that gave spirit, or this was the novel that gave spirit to the propaganda movement and paved the way to the revolution against Spain. In this book, he courageously exposed the evils in the Spanish and governments in the Philippines. Now, number 4 is revolutionary literature. Those are exposes that spark revolution and resistance in the hearts of Filipinos. Example, Andres Bonifacio, katungkulan gagawin ng mga anak ng bayan, obligation of our countrymen. So, it is an outfit of obligation, just than 10 Commandments, hence it is likewise likewise sealed rather, and Decalogo. And then Emilio Jacinto, Liwanag at Dilim, or in English, Light and Darkness. It is a collection of essays in different subjects like freedom, work, faith, government, and love of country. And then Apolinario Mabini, El Desarrollo y Saida de la República Filipina, the rise and the fall of the Philippine Republic. So this essay highlight the establishment of the Philippine Republic and its subsequent doom due to disunity among the Filipinos. And then Jose Rizal again, because we know na isa sa mga sinulat again ni Dr. Jose Rizal ay yung El Filibusterismo. So this is a zakel to the Noli. While Noli exposed the evils in society, the Phil exposed those in the government and in the church. However, the Noli has been dubbed the novel of society, while the El Filibusterismo is that of politics. Now, let's proceed to the American period in the year 1900 to 1940. The Philippines had a great leap in education and culture. The use of English alongside the Filipino was practiced. The Philippines public school system was introduced. Free public instructions was given to the Filipinos. The literature during the American period was considered as imitative of American model. Instead rather of asking the student to write original, students ended up following the form of American poet. Now, we have here form of American period. Number 1 is poetry. Poetry under the American rule still followed the style of the old, but have contents that range from the free writing to social concern under the Americans. So, Jose Corazon de Jesus in 1932 to 1996, popularly known as Batuti, created his own generation with his first poem. So one of the writers during the American period was Jose Corazon de Jesus. Mga Gintong Dahon, 1920, were poems preoccupied with such non-traditional theme as passion, staying or slaying grief, injustice, insanity, lovers, and suicides. Sa Dakong Silangan, 1928, returned to the awit form, retelling the story of Philippine under Spain and coming of the U.S. under the guise of friendship to take over from Spain. So those are the writings of Jose Corazon de Jesus. Dream from the period of revolution, depicting the cruelty and corruption and friar and the heroism of soldiers of the Katipunan. So number 3 is a remark novel. It talks of Dr. Jose Rizal's portrayal of social condition by colonial repressions. So here are the writers. Gabriel Vito Francisco, 1850-1835, is best known for his trilogy of Plogenza Gabellano, 1907. And then Capitan Versio, 1907. Alfaro, 1909, depicting the 30-year of colonial repression by the Spanish Ryle. And then Inigo Ed Regaldo, 1888, 1976, Madaling Araw, 1909, was his first novel showing the complex interrelation of issues in Filipino and contemporary Philippine society. So that's all. Any questions? Clarifications? Additions? So if you don't have any questions, just go to your learning path for your activity. And then if you want to review this presentation, just click again your learning path and then click the globe. And then, andun yung link. And then, please watch it again. And then, yun lang po. Thank you and God bless. And then, just message me or call me again at 0926297465. Thank you. God bless.